Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Good morning or afternoon, whenever you're listening to this, Bet the Board listeners. If you were expecting Todd and Payne this morning, sorry to disappoint. I'm going to be filling in for them for this Monday Week 14 review and look ahead podcast. For those not familiar, this is Billy. You can find me on Twitter at Watt_05. I attempt to write weekly articles throughout the season and have popped on the pod a couple times this year. Not to worry, the fellas were just traveling a bit and they will be back on Thursday. So we're going to follow the same format as usual for a Monday podcast. We're going to take a look at some of the good and not so good performances from this past week. We'll take a peek at some of the opening lines, any major line moves, and where some of these could be headed, as well as the two Monday night football games. I'll be giving some brief thoughts on each of those. So off we go. We'll get into it. Let's start with the good. Let's start with what we saw from Week 14 that was good. And we're going to start with Cleveland's offense. And you look at Mr. Elite, Mr. Joe Flacco is over there under center. He's not done anything that's really blown you away, but he definitely brings a little more oomph to this pass game. He finished yesterday with 311 pass yards, 3 pass touchdowns, and 1 interception. Look, it's very clear there is rust there on Flacco, but as he progresses in the season, it would not surprise me to see him continue to take steps in the right direction. More impressive than Flacco, though, is what head coach Kevin Stefanski's done with the amount of injuries to this team on the offensive end. It's spectacular. I mean, look at this offensive line. They lost Jack Conklin week 1. They lost Jedrick Willis. He's on IR. They lost him in the Arizona game. They didn't have DeJuan Jones yesterday. They lost their center, Ethan Pochik, in first half to an injury. They still don't have Nick Chubb. Obviously, we know what happened to Deshaun Watson, and they're on their 4th starting quarterback this year with Joe Flacco. So again, nothing really metrically has blown you away with this offense, but the fact they put up 31 points yesterday against a middling to, slightly below average Jacksonville defense with all the injuries they had, that was quite impressive to me. And, Cleveland's schedule sets them up nicely that they are now a massive favorite to make the playoffs north of minus 300. So that was some good that I saw. Moving on to the next team or performance was, how do you not love what Cincinnati's Jake Browning's doing? It shouldn't be overly surprising, though, if you really paid attention to this team during the offseason and even right before the season. Browning was getting quite a bit decent reviews from the wide receiver room. They kept saying this guy is a baller. Fans will forget, but Jamar Chase actually wanted Burrow to rest for those first 4 weeks of the season when he was dealing with his calf injury, instead of risking playing hurt. And there was some real confidence from that group, that wide receiver group, that Browning could hold down the fort and maybe just prevent them from going 0-4 to start the year. 2 weeks into, full prep performances, we got to take away that Pittsburgh game where, he had a short week off the Monday Night Football game, and there might have been some distrust in how he was going to handle this offense. But let's take that game out and just look. Browning's led the league in EPA and completion percentage over expectation, the composite blend for weeks 13 and 14. The coaching staff is making it somewhat easy on him. He's just averaging 4.5 yards per attempt. They're not asking him to pound the rock down the field and take deep shots. That's the second lowest air yards per attempt among qualifying quarterbacks. So really impressive to have a backup come in and do what he's doing right now. Good for that Cincinnati offense. They got a very tough schedule coming up, but a little bit of a bright spot for that team. So good on Cincinnati there. Third and finally, good performances. Let's talk about Dak in Dallas. Definitely got the monkey off the back type of win that can really build momentum with this team. You know, we've heard week after week that Dallas is really in this position at 10-3 because of their schedule, which they've played a very easy schedule, but this was a statement win and cover for the Cowboys. Dak was efficient. You know, they averaged 4.3 yards per carry against a good Eagles front. Again, they spread the ball around. 5 different pass catchers with 35-plus yards. Tight end Jake Ferguson continues his ascent into the top tier of pass-catching tight ends in the league. Last night marked his 6th 40-plus yard receiving game for the season. Cowboys finished 3 for 3 in the red zone. Payne's mentioned this on previous podcasts, but there's an adjustment to this offense post Week 7, post that bye week. From that point on, Week 8 through Week 14, Dallas is second in EPA per play on offense behind only the 49ers. And Dak is second in the EPA and completion percentage over expectation composite behind only Brock Purdy. So really impressive performance from Dallas. And you know what? They scored 33 and they weren't even pushed offensively because of the Eagles' turnovers in Dallas territory. It would not have surprised me at all if Eagles were able to convert some of those fumbles into touchdowns if we saw Dallas put up 40 points again. One more thing. Do they have a Justin Tucker-esque kicker in Brandon Aubrey? The kid is 30 for 30. He hasn't missed a field goal all year. And those deep bombs from 59-plus last night were about as perfect as they could be. That could be a weapon for Dallas down the stretch as we head towards the playoffs here. We're going to transition to the bad now. Got a couple teams that made the list here. Shouldn't surprise our listeners. Detroit's going to pop up on the bad, and it shouldn't surprise because the boys on Thursday released Chicago plus 3.5 as a best bet. That one got home with relative ease down the stretch in the fourth quarter, so thankful we didn't have to sweat there. This Lions team is trending down fast, and you look at Jared Goff. Over the past 3 weeks, he's 23rd among qualifying quarterbacks in adjusted EPA per play, and that's coming against a Green Bay defense, a New Orleans defense who's definitely taken a step back, and the Chicago defense who is playing better, but I wouldn't call Chicago's defense a top 10 defense by any means. Goff threw 2 more interceptions yesterday. Lions were 1 for 5 on fourth down again, so there is some variance there with this team. Thanksgiving Day against Green Bay, they were also 1 for 5 on fourth down. Obviously, that's going to change some of the offensive output when you're 2 for 10 on fourth down and 2 losses. But they just seem a little disjointed a bit on that side of the ball. And on defense, I mean, woof, man. It is ugly. And Chicago was only 2 for 5 in the red zone yesterday. That score could have been worse. This Detroit defense is just really struggling. I'm not sure what the answers are either to get this thing back on track. The secondary is just getting torched. So Detroit falls into the bad category there. The other unit that's going to go in the bad, and I kind of hesitated with this one, but I'm going to throw them in there, and that's the Philadelphia pass defense. Now, let's take some things into context here with what they faced. The past 4 weeks, they faced Dak in Dallas. They faced Brock Purdy in San Francisco. They faced Josh Allen in Buffalo. And they faced Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. In the last 4 weeks, they're 28th in dropback EPA and 28th in rush EPA. Again, against the toughest stretch of quarterbacks or offenses any team has faced during that span. But there's some real concerns here, and I think you have to question whether or not these cornerbacks are just a bit past their prime in regards to Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Darius Slay especially, you're seeing him on the replays. He's getting called for pass interference, but he's being even more physical as he's gotten older, a lot more grabby. And we might see that called a little bit more. It's becoming more obvious that he's maybe lost a step. They lost safety Blankenship yesterday to a concussion and already don't have Justin Evans for the remainder of the season. He's on IR, so the safety position is pretty thin right now. It's interesting because his defense they have some great win rate numbers. They're top 5 in pass rush and run stop win rate, but they're only 14th in adjusted line yards and 15th in adjusted sack rate. So they're not getting home in terms of the pressure and getting sacks. Now, they play Seattle next week, Monday Night Football, and then they go Giants, Arizona Giants. And it's very possible that we see during that stretch the defensive numbers improve. Everything looks kosher. They fix their issues. You're going to hear the talking points that this defense is ready for the playoff run. It's important not to forget what this team has looked like on that side of the ball against playoff caliber competition when we get there. Dallas, again, I mentioned it, they were never really pushed last night, especially in the second half because of all the Eagles' fumbles in Dallas territory. Otherwise, Dallas could have put up 45-plus points in that football game. So Philly pass defense goes in the bad category. Something that, is it scheme? Is it these older cornerbacks just struggling to keep up with the game? It remains to be seen, but it's definitely something that should be concerning as an Eagles fan. So that's going to be it for a good and bad portion of the pod. And we're going to move ahead to these look-ahead lines and what we see for next week. So Las Vegas goes from getting 3.5 at home to a soft 3. Even we're seeing some 3 flats against the Chargers. Obviously, Herbert's not going to be available. He fractured his finger on his throwing hand. And it looks like head coach Brandon Staley's tenure is close to being over there too. Chargers, you can pretty much stick a fork in them at this point in terms of playoff probability. All that being said, it's kind of tough for me to imagine this number getting pressed out to 4. That seems a little rich for a Vegas team that generated 0 points last week. So that's one of the bigger moves, but I would pause on just loading up on Vegas here. I think at 4 we'd see some buyback on the Chargers. Second game, we'll talk about Cincinnati Bengals. +1 on the look ahead, and now they are out to as high as 4. There's even some 4.5s in the market. Obviously, we talked about the offensive resurgence behind Jake Browning, and then factoring in Minnesota losing Justin Jefferson to a chest injury, but they seem to have some optimism that this is not going to be a long-term injury. Alexander Mattison and right tackle Brian O'Neill both went down with an ankle sprain. Brian O'Neill's really the big one we want to watch here. He's an excellent right tackle in the league, so losing him would be big. It seems as though Nick Mullins is probably going to be the guy moving forward after he led them to a 3-0 victory in the fourth quarter. Got them down there for a late kick. So you can understand why we saw Cincy go from +1, even if they went to 2.5 or 3. I do believe this is kind of peak pricing here for Jake Browning, laying 4 against a very good Brian Flores defense. Despite the injury situation for Minnesota, this just feels pricey, and I would not be surprised at all if the 4.5s and the 4s all got taken out, and we see this kind of settle in around a soft 3.5 or a juiced 3 for Cincinnati. Other game that moved, and it's a small move, but it's bigger in context, is Cleveland going from 2.5 on the look-aheads to a strong 3, and we're seeing even some 3.5s popping. We talked about what this offense has looked like since Joe Flacco's taken over. Definitely looks more competent. And Chicago's obviously riding high on this little 2-game win streak, and Field and the Chicago offense looks a little bit better. But now they get to go up against Jim Schwartz and a Cleveland defense at home. I'm not surprised to see this number cross the 3 at some of the sharper shops in the world. It wouldn't even surprise me to see this get pushed out to as high as 4. Chicago's defense has been playing better. This is a tough spot for this team going into Cleveland. The other one we're going to talk about is the total in Washington and LA. Washington off a bye, traveling to the Rams. Total on the look ahead was 46 points, which was obviously short. We saw on the reopen 48 and a half, and this is already being bet out to as high as 49 and a half. It's very difficult to imagine a team who has not generated much of a pass rush in Washington. They're 22nd in pass rush win rate, 25th in adjusted sack rate, and the secondary's been so poor. It's tough to imagine how they're going to stop this Rams passing attack. It really is. And you look at the other side of the ball, it's going to force Washington to play catch up and sling the pill. And Rams currently don't have like an elite pass rush that is just going to sack Howell 8 and 9 times. So he should have a bit more time back there. I can see Washington having some success on offense as well. So, I can understand why this total from 46 on the look ahead out to 49 and a half. I can understand why this thing was hit over. It wouldn't surprise me to see this even go a little higher. Maybe we get to 50 and a half. It's going to be on the turf, a fast field for both teams. So it doesn't surprise me at all to see this thing take off. All right, let's transition here to the 2 Monday night football games. We're going to start with Tennessee and Miami. On the look-ahead line, we saw Miami a 12.5 point favorite with a total of 44.5. Since then, we've seen some sharp money drive the total out to 47.5 after the conclusion of last week's games. But we did see a little buy on the under at 47.5, came back down to 46. But even as I speak now, this is slowly trickling back up to 47. Miami saw that early money come out, pushed this thing to 14. Again, money came in, sent this back down to 13 midweek. But we are out to 14 again. And it wouldn't surprise me to see this even potentially hit 14.5. And it shouldn't be a surprise why. Let's start with when Tennessee has the ball on offense, what we're seeing here. So Tennessee's faced the 24th strength of schedule thus far, and they've only graded out 22nd in offensive DVOA, though 11th in rush EPA, which is trending even a little better in the past 5 weeks. They're 9th in rush EPA. Looks like Henry's going to be able to go off the head injury, and that is good for this offense, who should be healthy outside of tight end Josh Wiley. Will Levis is an interesting case here. He's pushing the ball down the field. He's first in air yards at 10.1 yards per attempt, but he's dead last in completion percentage and expected completion percentage. So there's clearly an accuracy problem. And obviously when you're throwing the ball down the field that much, your accuracy numbers and completion percentages are not going to look as good. On the plus side for Tennessee, I like their weapons. Hopkins, Treylon Burks should be a little bit healthier this game. They got the speedster Chris Moore on the outside. They have a good pass-catching tight end in Chig Okonkwo. The offensive line's been top half of the league in pass block and run block win rate. They're 6th in adjusted line yards. Because of what we saw with Henry take that head injury, is it possible we see a little bit more of Tajay Spears in the pass game and potentially in the run game? Hopefully, because he brings a burst. But if we bottom line this Tennessee offense, they're only 28th in dropback EPA since Will Levis has taken over. And that's significant because only one of those games was against a current trending pass defense in the top 15. That being the Indianapolis Colts, who I'm sure many of the listeners are actually surprised they were even in the top 15. Because talent-wise, they're just not really a top-tier unit. And obviously, we just saw yesterday what Jake Browning did to them. He kind of torched them. So Tennessee, bottom 5 passing offense, essentially against a bottom half strength of schedule. And now they go up against the Miami defense. And yes, Miami's played the 30th strength of schedule over the course of the year. And even recently, they really haven't played anyone with a punch since KC in Week 9. And we've seen KC's had their struggles on offense. All that being said, it's very clear this defense has been improving week after week. And they have a healthy secondary, especially at the cornerback position. They've had a longer time to deal with Vic Fangio's scheme. And you're seeing it. You're seeing the production. They've graded out 13th in overall defensive DVA for the season. But honestly, they're trending much better. The last 5 weeks, Miami is first in pass defense EPA and 5th in run defense EPA. For the season, they're 7th in pass rush win rate. Obviously, they're going to be missing Jalen Phillips. They missed him. If you're following Hard Knocks, he tore his Achilles. And in his place has stepped up Andrew Van Ginkel, who's had a great game against Washington. He brings some energy on the edge. Obviously, he's not Phillips, but he can fit in with this scheme and make an impact here. Safety Javon Holland, he's an opportunity to suit up Monday, but I think the Dolphins are going to make sure he's really 100% healthy before putting him back out there. They have a very capable backup in Brandon Jones. So he's listed as questionable, but it would surprise me if we see Javon Holland today. It's Tennessee offensive line, 29th in adjusted sack rate. You could see Miami really garner some pressure here, especially if Tennessee's in a game script where they're going to have to come from behind. Levis does like to hold on to the ball a little bit. He looks for those deep shots. So, again, Miami's defensive line with a lead could have a lot of success here getting pressure. If you're hopeful for Tennessee's offense, maybe you look at the fact that Miami lost Jerome Baker last week with a knee injury. He's going to IR, so Duke Riley's going to take over. Maybe there's some confusion there. If you're hoping for Tennessee to have some offensive success, maybe you point to that. But all in all, this is really not a great matchup for Tennessee's offense, and especially with the way the Miami defense is trending. Other side of the ball, let's talk about Miami's offense against Tennessee's defense. What is there really to say outside of this being a gigantic mismatch? The Titans' defense has faced the 24th strength of schedule in terms of opposing offenses, and they've been a bottom 5 pass defense all year. They are 30th in dropback EPA for the season, and even over the last 5 weeks, that number's barely moved. They're only 28th, so it's not like they're trending towards playing better in the secondary. Christian Fulton, questionable tonight. Honestly, I'm not even sure if that matters at this point. The bigger concern, if you're a Titans backer, should be you don't have Jeffrey Simmons in the middle. For years, if you could say one thing about this Titans defense, it was the front 4 and the front 7 was borderline elite versus the run, and that was mostly because of Simmons. This year, especially as of late, they've taken a step back. They are 20th in run stop win rate, 12th in defensive rush EPA for the season and for the last 5 weeks. And now we're going against one of the most complex run schemes with no all-pro in the middle. That is a problem for the Titans. So what's the plan? What is the plan for Tennessee stopping this passing offense? Miami's 2nd in overall offensive DVA this year, 3rd in dropback EPA. The O-line, despite suffering short-term injury after short-term injury. And again, they don't have Robert Hunt this week. They don't, Teron Armstead's questionable, but he seemed pretty uncertain Saturday about his status. So they're going to be dealing with those 2 injuries. they've still managed to pump out first in adjusted line yard, 6th in run block win rate, and 3rd in adjusted sack rate. Obviously, I could sit here and talk about Tua and Tyreek and their connection and the advantages here, but it is what it is. I don't see a clear path for the Titans to consistently make stops in this game. If Miami has a poor night offensively, it will most certainly be because of their own miscues rather than elite quarterback or secondary play from Tennessee. Final thoughts on this one. What's the case for Tennessee here? The number's a touch high. I'd venture to guess at 14 and a hook. We see some Tennessee money. But where are the advantages? If you're looking to back Tennessee, are we just betting on a vintage, elite Mike Vrabel game plan as a big dog where he shortens the game? They pound the rock to Henry with a little bit of success, create some turnovers and chaos. And, we're hoping to sit in the fourth quarter and it's like 20-16 Miami with 5 minutes to go. We've seen him able to pull this off with less talented offensive teams. Can he pull it off against Miami? It's tough to see. It's tough to see without some turnovers. So do we see some money at 14.5 with Tennessee? We probably do. Is it a party I want to join? I don't think so personally, but I get it. The number is a little bit high. In terms of props, there are some minus 150s out there for Will Levis to throw an interception. With a high spread like this and the likelihood of Tennessee playing catch-up, that's a little short. We'll be playing this prop. We'll be playing Will Levis throw an interception up to minus 170. So that's a look for that first Monday Night Football game. Let's dive into the second game, which is Green Bay. They are laying 6 on the road against the New York Football Giants. After the big home win against Kansas City on Sunday Night Football, we saw the market open 6. Green Bay took some early money, pushed this thing out to as high as 7 across the market, and that's when we saw a buy on the Giants. We saw a midweek buy at 7. And then another buy yesterday at 6.5. The total stayed steady at 37, but there is definitely some sharp money on New York here. We'll be a little more brief with this one. A little less intriguing matchup to me, but let's talk about Green Bay when they're on offense. You got to tip your cap to him and Coach LaFleur for turning this thing around. Green Bay is now 12th in offensive DVOA on the season. And over the past 5 weeks, they're 3rd best in dropback EPA, thanks to some stellar play from Jordan Love. In that span, Love is 5th in completion percentage over expectation and EPA composite. He's pushing the ball down the field. He's 5th in attended air yards. These young weapons, Romeo Doubs, Weeks, Reed, this young wide receiver group they're really fun to watch. And Green Bay, down the road, the next 1 to 3 years is set up quite nicely with this young group of skill players who can kind of grow together with Love. The offensive line for the Giants is also playing pretty well. They're 2nd in pass block win rate. And now they get to face what you typically face when you go up against a Wink Martindale defense, which is pressure. The Giants are 2nd in hurry percentage for the season and 10th in pass rush win rate. But all that being said, the G-men they're only 29th in sack percentage despite sending consistent pressure. Good thing for Green Bay here is they just faced a team in Kansas City with Steve Spagnuolo who sends a ton of pressure, and Love handled it very well. He used, tight ends Tucker Kraft and Ben Sims to help alleviate what was being sent at him and had a lot of good dump-offs to kind of counter that pressure. And after the game, he said, I think it's me personally, said Love after the game. It's just being able to see the stuff. I've got more reps. I'm more comfortable understanding where I need to go with the ball. I think the O-line is doing a great job just being able to pick this stuff up. It's not easy when they're bringing all outs, some of these blitzes, things like that. But they've been doing a great job giving me time. And then the receivers, obviously, they're having awareness of when they need to be open and how long I've got and just going out there and making plays. So if you're a Green Bay fan, a Green Bay backer, you love to hear that. You love to hear that there's just more continuity on this offense because early in the season, that's what you weren't seeing. Injuries tonight. Looks like Aaron Jones is going to miss, and they're going to be without Christian Watson as well. Those are probably the two most explosive players on the offensive side of the ball. Good thing for them, though, is they're taking on a New York Giants defense who two nose tackles, A'Shawn Robinson and Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence, by the way, 4th in pass rush win rate from that position. They're both questionable to play with hamstring injuries, and that could really be huge. The Giants don't have Leonard Williams in the middle. You know, they traded him away to Seattle at the trade deadline. It looks like Isaiah Simmons is also questionable with an ankle injury. If you're Green Bay and you're looking at the Giants, who is 25th in run stop win rate, and some of the beef in the middle is potentially dinged up, do you talk yourself into doing the 4 yards in a cloud of dust with a heavy dose of Dillon tonight and just moving the chains? You know, the defense is only 27th in adjusted line yards. They're 31st in adjusted sack rate. Now, they've been trending better. There's no doubt. Giants are 13th in dropback EPA and 12th in rush EPA defense over the past 5 weeks. But we got to look at the offensive they faced. They faced New England. They faced Dallas, who, you know, dropped a 45 burger on them. And then they faced Washington, the Raiders, and the Jets. So it's not like they faced these elite offenses and they've had this great defensive run. They're just playing a lot of bad offenses, and out of the 5 they've played recently, the one who's borderline elite, Dallas, destroyed them. So that's really the question coming in, is how Green Bay handles this Wink Martindale pressure, and if they decide to run the ball a little bit more tonight with these interior defensive injuries to the Giants line. If we look on the other side of the ball, when the Giants have it on offense, let's look at the Green Bay defense real quick. No Jair Alexander. Darnell Savage and Eric Stokes are both questionable for tonight. Stokes got in pretty much a full practice every day this week, but he's got a hamstring injuries. Hamstrings on skilled players can be quite finicky, which is why I think we still have a questionable tag there. Quay Walker is almost certainly going to be a no-go at the linebacker position. He's listed as doubtful, and he hasn't put in a practice all week. On the other side of the ball, no Evan Neal for the Giants. Paris Campbell's questionable to go with a knee injury after he popped up on the Saturday injury report as a surprise DNP. So maybe something happened from Friday to Saturday. He didn't practice Saturday. Now he's questionable. Tight end Daniel Bellinger's questionable. They need him. Obviously, they don't have Darren Waller anymore, but he's been out Friday and Saturday with an illness. It would surprise me if he didn't go if the reason he's been sitting out is with an illness. This would be day number 3 with the illness, so I bet you he's going to go. It's just he hasn't been practicing, so they have him as questionable. Biggest talk out of New York media this week, for the Giants at least, is the decision to ride with Tommy DeVito over Tyrod Taylor. And that's quite an interesting move just from a pure talent perspective. DeVito's graded out 35th in completion percentage over expectation and EPA per play since he's been starting. Some of the players talked, though, about the decision. Bobby Okereke said the team reacted well. We've all rallied around Tommy these past couple games. We have the utmost respect for Tyrod, the way he carries himself, and the body of work he's had in his career, but we're all excited for Tommy. Dayball talked about how we are playing with awesome passion. Okereke said, and I think that's a reflection of the energy that Tommy's brought. Now, that's all good and well. He definitely has brought that energy, and you can see there's a little more pop to that side of the ball. But, again, we can't ignore the O-line's 32nd in adjusted line yards. They're 32nd in adjusted sack rate. Obviously, they've dealt with a plethora of injuries this season, but the talent still is just not good there. If you're the Giants, you have a chance at maybe running the football here with some success. Green Bay's only 18th in run-stop win rate and 25th in adjusted line yards. Maybe that's an avenue to move the ball with some consistency here. But again, it's tough watching Tommy DeVito play and thinking that the Giants are just going to light it up against an average defensive unit, which is kind of where Green Bay is trending towards right now. They're 13th in drop back EPA the last 5 weeks and 18th in rush EPA the last 5 weeks. So kind of a middling defensive unit. Does the Giants just have enough weapons, and can the O-line hold up enough to warrant some offensive success here? I'm not sure, but definitely some very sharp money came in on New York. That's +7 and +6.5. And if you're betting on them here, I think the thought has to be that this Green Bay team has kind of reached their pinnacle in terms of pricing. They're laying north of 6 on the road against a team coming off a bye, even a team as poor as the Giants. It just would not surprise me to see this continue to trend down as we get closer to game time. I could see some 5.5 start popping up. Though you want to keep an eye on those interior defensive injuries for the Giants. It's a big deal if Dexter Lawrence can't go, or both him and Robinson can't go. That is a big deal for that defensive line. So that's it, guys. That's breaking down both of those Monday Night Football games. If there's any more props, which I'm sure there will be, that we'll be betting, I will put them out at my Twitter, which is the handle @Watt_05. The boys should be back Thursday for the preview show for Week 15. As always, very grateful for the opportunity to talk some football with the Bet the Board listening base. Share any insights I may have on these games in the betting market. So Payne and Todd should be back Thursday, and thanks again.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.